The HFY Dominion had conquered hundreds of worlds. Their fleet was massive, their warriors brutal, and their technology far superior to most species in the galaxy. For centuries, no civilization had been able to stand against them. Now, they had set their sights on Earth. A fleet of 20 massive warships moved silently through the void, heading straight for the Sol system. Each ship was a fortress, equipped with the deadliest weapons in the known universe. The HFY had studied humans from afar and found nothing impressive about them. They were small, fragile creatures with weak bodies and short lifespans. Compared to the mighty HFY, they were nothing. Admiral Krax, the leader of the fleet, sat on his command throne, watching the holographic display of Earth. The blue and green planet looked peaceful, unaware of the destruction that was coming. "Humans will be easy," muttered Krax, his sharp claws tapping against the armrest of his chair. "By this time tomorrow, this planet will belong to the Dominion." His officers nodded in agreement. Conquering weak species had become routine. There was no challenge anymore. Then, something unexpected happened. A message appeared on their main communication screen. It was a simple text, written in the common galactic language. "Turn back. This is your only warning." Silence filled the command deck for a moment. Then, laughter erupted. The HFY officers found it amusing. These tiny humans thought they could threaten the Dominion. Admiral Krax smirked. "How bold. They must think we are fools." He turned to his communication officer. "Send a response." The officer nodded and typed a reply. "Surrender now or be destroyed." Seconds passed. Then the human message changed. "You don't understand. This is not a threat. This is a warning." Admiral Krax leaned forward, his amusement fading. Something about this message felt strange. It wasn't written like a desperate plea. It wasn't arrogant either. It was calm. Too calm. He shook his head. "Enough games. Begin the invasion." The fleet moved forward, passing Jupiter, then Mars. Their sensors detected no military defense capable of stopping them. One of Krax's officers, a young strategist named Vrex, frowned at his console. "Sir, there is something strange." Krax turned to him. "What is it?" Vrex hesitated before speaking. "The humans, they are not reacting the way we expected. They are not preparing for battle. They are not sending ships to intercept us. They are just waiting." Krax snorted. "They know they are doomed. This is fear." But deep inside, something about this felt wrong. Every species they had conquered had tried to fight back, even when they had no chance. But these humans were not running. They were not sending desperate messages for mercy. They had simply warned them. And now, they waited. The fleet reached the orbit of Earth. The planet was quiet. There were no defense stations, no warships in formation, just a few satellites drifting in space. Krax's second-in-command, Commander Zorak, frowned. "Where is their fleet?" "They don't have one worth mentioning," Krax said. "Their technology is primitive. Even if they gathered all their ships, it would not be enough to stop us." Vrex's fingers hovered over his console. "Sir, should we scan for hidden weapons?" Krax sighed. "Fine. Do it." Vrex activated the scans. The results came in seconds later, and his blood ran cold. "Sir, there's something strange in their energy readings." Krax raised an eyebrow. "Explain." Vrex swallowed hard. "There is a pattern. A network of signals running through their entire planet. It's like they are waiting for something." Krax waved his hand dismissively. "More paranoia. Prepare the orbital bombardment. We will show these humans what true power looks like." The fleet's weapons powered up. Giant cannons aimed at key locations, military bases, major cities, and government centers. One command, and Earth would be crippled within seconds. Krax stood tall. "Fire." Nothing happened. Krax frowned. "I said fire." His weapons officer frantically tapped his console. "Sir, We have a problem. Our weapons are offline. Krax's eyes widened. What? More warnings appeared across the fleet. Systems failing. Shields flickering. Power levels dropping. Krax slammed his fist against his chair. What is happening? Vrex stared at his screen in horror. Sir, they knew we were coming. They set a trap. Before Krax could respond, another message appeared on their screen. This time, it was a video. A human man in a dark uniform stood in a dimly lit room. His expression was calm, his eyes cold. You should have listened, he said. Then the message ended, and the first Selfar warship exploded. Admiral Krax watched in disbelief as one of his warships erupted into a massive fireball, its wreckage scattering into space. The XL-FAR fleet had never lost a battle before it even began. This was impossible. Their technology was superior. Their ships were invincible. And yet, the impossible had just happened. Panic spread across the command deck. Officers scrambled to regain control of the fleet's systems, their claws tapping furiously at their consoles. Reports came in from every ship, and none of them were good. Weapons remained offline. Shields flickered in and out. Even their communication systems were failing. Krax clenched his jaw. What is happening? Vrex's voice was shaky as he read the latest data. Sir, the humans. They have some kind of. Another explosion cut him off. This time, it wasn't just one ship. 3 warships were destroyed in a matter of seconds. The XL-FAR fleet had come prepared for a battle. But this wasn't a battle. It was a massacre. The humans hadn't fired a single shot. Sir, a technician shouted, we are detecting something. It's everywhere. Krax turned to him sharply. What do you mean something? Speak clearly. The technician's claws trembled as he zoomed in on the energy readings. It's a frequency. A signal. It's inside our ships, sir. Inside our systems. Vrex's face turned pale. They hacked us. Krax's mind reeled. Impossible. Our systems are encrypted with the highest. They were waiting for us. Vrex interrupted, his voice almost a whisper. They knew we would come. They studied our technology. They planned this. Krax refused to believe it. Humans were primitive. Their ships were laughable. Their military was nothing compared to the Dominion. And yet, here they were, dying without even understanding how. A cold realization crept into Krax's mind. This wasn't a coincidence. The humans had sent a warning, and they hadn't been begging for mercy. They had been giving them a chance to leave. A new message appeared on the screen. You were given a choice. You didn't listen. Krax slammed his fist against the control panel. Enough. We are XL-FAR. We do not run from insects. He turned to his remaining fleet. Override all systems manually. Regain control. Prepare for planetary bombardment. The officers scrambled to obey. Slowly, painfully, some of the ships managed to bring their weapons back online. The XL-FAR fleet still had numbers on their side. Even if humans had caught them off guard, they couldn't fight back forever. Lock onto their cities, Krax commanded. Fire. This time, the cannons roared to life. Bright beams of energy shot toward the planet. And then something even stranger happened. The moment the energy blasts entered Earth's atmosphere, they disappeared. No impact, no explosions, no destruction. It was as if the planet itself had swallowed the attack. Krax stared in shock. How? What kind of technology is this? Vrex was scanning furiously. Sir, I don't think this is technology. Krax's blood ran cold. Then what is it? Before Vrex could answer, the ship's lights flickered. The temperature dropped. An unnatural silence filled the air. And then the screaming began. It came from all over the fleet, one by one. Zelfar crew members collapsed, clutching their heads, their bodies shaking violently. Some foamed at the mouth. Others gasped for air as if something unseen was crushing their lungs. Sir, A medic cried. "They're dying." Krax turned in horror as one of his strongest warriors, an elite captain, let out a guttural scream and vanished into thin air. Not disintegrated, not teleported, just gone. Panic spread like wildfire. Even those who were unharmed began to feel it, a presence. Something was here, something that wasn't human, but wasn't HFY either. A deep voice echoed through the ship, through every ship, through every mind. "We warned you. It wasn't human. It wasn't machine. It wasn't even a voice in the normal sense. It was something older, something beyond comprehension." For the first time in his life, Admiral Krax felt fear. "Retreat," he whispered. Then louder, "Retreat. Now." The order spread, but it was already too late. One by one, the warships began to disappear, not explode, not break apart, just vanish as if they had never been there at all. Krax turned to Vrex, desperation in his eyes. "What is happening?" Vrex looked at him, terror written all over his face. "Sir, I think we were never meant to reach this planet." Krax didn't have time to respond. The command deck went dark. And then, silence. Krax opened his eyes to absolute silence. He was no longer on his ship. He wasn't even in space. He stood in an empty void, a vast expanse stretching infinitely in every direction. There was no sky, no stars, no ground beneath his feet, yet somehow he remained standing. A cold, unnatural light illuminated everything without a source. His breath came in shallow gasps. He had always been in control, always the predator. But here, in this place, he was small. A whisper brushed against his mind. "You were warned." Krax turned sharply, but there was nothing there. No ships, no crew, just him. His last memory flashed before him, the fleet crumbling, his soldiers vanishing, an unseen force sweeping through their ranks like a god of death. His claws tightened into fists. "What is this?" he roared. No answer, only silence. And then a shadow moved. It wasn't a creature. It wasn't even a form. It was something else, something that existed outside the rules he understood. It twisted and shifted, its shape impossible to define, as though it was made of darkness itself. Krax stepped back instinctively. He had fought wars, conquered planets, annihilated civilizations. Nothing had ever made him afraid. Until now. The shadow spoke without a voice, its words appearing in his mind like an invading force. "You came here believing yourselves to be rulers, conquerors. You thought we were weak, that we would break beneath your strength." The space around him trembled, the very void pulsing with unseen energy. "But your kind does not understand. You see planets as resources. You see life as something to be owned. But Earth is different." Krax's heart pounded. "The humans. The humans." The voice repeated, amusement laced in its tone. "You still think this is about them?" A deep, resonating hum filled the air. Images flashed before Krax's eyes. Earth, but not as he had seen it before. Older, deeper. The ocean swirled with ancient forces, unseen to mortal eyes. The mountains pulsed with power, their foundations stretching beyond the physical world. And beneath the surface, beneath the cities and streets, something watched. Something waited. Krax stumbled, the visions too much to bear. This is not possible." We scanned the planet. We saw no advanced defenses, no weapons capable of. "Because your kind does not see beyond the surface." The voice sharpened, pressing against his very essence. "You were never fighting humans. You were never meant to fight at all." The shadows coiled around him. A pressure built in his chest, a force greater than anything he had ever encountered. "We let you exist. We let you spread your little empires across the stars. But not here. Not this place." The weight in Krax's mind grew unbearable. "Why? Why did you let us come this far, then? Why not destroy us before we arrived?" The presence hesitated. And then, for the first time, it spoke with something resembling regret. Because we had to know. The void rippled, and suddenly, he wasn't alone anymore. The figures appeared, forming a circle around him. They were not Selfar. They were not human. Some had no faces, no features at all. Some were tall, their bodies shifting like mist. Others were solid, their eyes burning with unreadable intelligence. They were old, older than stars, older than time itself. One of them stepped forward. "You have proven what we feared," it said, "that your kind is unworthy, that you cannot be trusted." Krax fell to his knees. He could feel it now, the sheer, overwhelming power in this place. His pride, his conquests, his victories across 100 worlds, none of it mattered here. "You came to take," the being continued, "to destroy. You did not listen. You did not respect. And now you will understand the cost." The air turned heavy. Krax tried to move, but his body was no longer his own. His mind felt as though it was unraveling, piece by piece. "Please," the word was foreign to him, a sound he had never spoken before. The mighty Admiral Krax, conqueror of civilizations, was begging. The figures regarded him without emotion. "We do not seek your destruction," one said. "We seek your absence." The shadows thickened. Krax felt himself being pulled apart, not physically, but in a way he couldn't explain. His thoughts scattered. His memories unraveled. His very existence faded like mist in the wind. The last thing he heard before everything turned to nothing was a whisper. "The warning was your chance. You will not receive another." And then Admiral Krax was gone. The command deck of the Selfar flagship was eerily silent. The fleet had been vast. Hundreds of warships, each one powerful enough to level a planet, had descended upon the insignificant blue world. Victory had been inevitable. And yet, Admiral Krax was missing. High Commander Vulik stood at the central console, his claws twitching in unease. The transmission from Krax's ship had cut out mid-sentence. Every attempt to re-establish contact had failed. No wreckage, no escape pods, no distress signals. Nothing. The fleet's most formidable warship had simply vanished. And with it, the supreme leader of the invasion. Vulik exhaled sharply. "Deploy scouting units. I want a full planetary sweep. Find the Admiral's signal." The officers hesitated. One of them, a younger lieutenant, shifted nervously before speaking. "Commander, we have already scanned the system. And there is nothing. Not a single trace of the Admiral's ship." Vulik's jaw tightened. "That is impossible." The officer hesitated, then spoke again, his voice quieter. "Commander, we also detected an anomaly before the signal was lost." Vulik turned sharply. An anomaly. A holo projection flickered to life above the control panel. A grainy recording appeared. A single frame captured from the last known location of Krax's ship. It was wrong. Vulik had fought across dozens of worlds, seen the vast reaches of the galaxy, encountered things that defied understanding. But this, a distortion hovered in space, where the Admiral's warship had once been. Not an explosion, not debris, just a rippling, twisting void, as if space itself had been wounded. Vulik's instincts screamed at him. "Get away. Leave now." He gritted his teeth, forcing the fear down. He was Selfar, a warrior, a conqueror. He did not fear the unknown. "Analyze it," he ordered. The technicians hesitated. "Commander, it is not behaving like any known phenomenon. Our instruments cannot measure it properly." Vulik's claws tapped against the console. Something else was happening here. Something beyond logic, beyond technology. Krax had been the greatest war leader of their empire. If he had been taken, erased, this was no ordinary conflict. Vulik turned to his officers. "Open a channel to all ships. Tell them to maintain battle formations. No one is to act without my direct command." The officers saluted. "Yes, Commander." The moment the transmission was sent, the lights across the control room flickered. Vulik's breath caught in his throat. The entire flagship shuddered, not from an external attack, but from something deep within. A warning klaxon screamed across the bridge. "Status report." Vulik barked. The lead technician's mandibles clicked frantically as he studied the readings. "Sir, we are detecting movement inside the ship." Vulik's claws tightened around the console. "Borders." The technician shook his head. "Negative. The ship's internal sensors show nothing. There is no physical entity, no life signatures. Yet the readings indicated movement. Something was here." A sudden, sharp noise cut through the air. A garbled whisper, flickering through the communication channels. And then, a voice. It was not HFY. It was not human. "You were warned." The bridge fell into chaos. Officers shouted. Weapons were drawn. But Vulik barely heard them. The voice had not spoken in sound. It had spoken directly into his mind. The ship trembled again. The holo-projection flickered, shifting, distorting, until an image appeared. Vulik's mandibles parted in shock. It was Admiral Krax, or what was left of him. His form was barely recognizable, his body blurred and twisting like a broken reflection in shattered glass. His eyes, once sharp and full of arrogance, were wide with something the great admiral had never known. Terror. Krax's mouth moved, but no sound came. Then his form collapsed into nothing, as though he had never existed. Vulik's blood ran cold. The crew stood frozen. No one dared to speak. No one dared to breathe. Then the whisper returned, filling the air like a storm. "Leave, while you still can." The distortion in space pulsed, and for the first time in HFY history, a war fleet felt the weight of something far greater than war. It was judgment. Vulik's next words determined the fate of their entire race. Vulik had fought many battles. He had conquered entire worlds, reduced civilizations to ash, and crushed those who dared resist the might of the HFY Empire. But never, never had he felt this. Fear. The voice still echoed in his mind, clawing at his thoughts like unseen talons. His entire crew had heard it, felt it. The warning had been clear. "Leave, while you still can." And yet, Vulik hesitated. Retreat was unacceptable. They were warriors, not cowards. And yet, something deep in his core whispered that this was not a battle. This was something else entirely. The flagship's systems flickered again. A low hum vibrated through the deck, like the ship itself was groaning in protest. A technician's voice cut through the heavy silence. "Commander, our long-range scanners are detecting movement." Vulik's claws clenched against the console. "Human forces." The officer swallowed. "No, sir. It's something else." The holographic display flickered, revealing a vast blackness spreading through space. It was like ink spilling across the stars, devouring light as it moved. It wasn't an army. It wasn't ships. It was something alive. Vulik's mind struggled to comprehend it. His species, for all their dominance, had rules to the universe. There were limits to science, to logic. But this, whatever this was, it was beyond limits. It defied understanding. The lieutenant at the sensors whispered, "It's heading straight for us." A shrill alarm erupted across the ship. Officers scrambled at their stations. The display darkened for a second, then returned with one horrifying update. The fleet was shrinking. Not because of damage, not because of an attack. Ships were disappearing. One by one, the vessels that had once blotted out the sky were vanishing into nothingness. No explosions, no distress signals. Just gone. Like cracks. "Raise shields." Vulik commanded. "All ships, fire on that anomaly." The command was relayed instantly. The HFY fleet opened fire, unleashing a storm of plasma, missiles, and energy weapons. The darkness in space trembled, and for a brief, fleeting moment, Vulik thought it had worked. Then, everything stopped. The weapon's fire froze midair, as if time itself had been severed. The brilliant streaks of destruction simply hung in space, unmoving like shattered glass suspended in a frozen river. Then they reversed. The energy blasts, the missiles, everything the fleet had launched, turned back and came straight for them. Evasive maneuvers. Someone screamed, but it was already too late. The HFY ships were struck by their own firepower. Shields collapsed instantly. Hulls buckled under the impossible assault. Hundreds of warships were torn apart in seconds. Vulic's flagship trembled violently. Emergency lights bathed the bridge in red. Smoke poured from shattered consoles. The air stank of burning circuitry and fear. Vulic forced himself to his feet. His vision swam. His crew were barely holding on, their eyes wide with disbelief. And then, a shadow moved on the bridge. Not on the screens, not outside the ship. Inside. The lights flickered, and a figure stepped out of the air itself. It was human, or at least it looked human. Tall, cloaked in a flowing black void, its eyes were like twin dying stars, burning and collapsing inward at the same time. The bridge crew froze. Vulic reached for his weapon, but the moment he moved, the figure raised a hand. Vulic's body locked in place. He could not move. The figure spoke. Its voice was not a voice. It was inside his head, deep and cold, whispering directly into his mind. You did not listen. Vulic's throat tightened. He tried to speak, to demand answers, to resist. But he could do nothing. The figure's head tilted slightly. Your empire has destroyed worlds without mercy. You took, you burned. You never asked if there was a price. Vulic felt the weight of the words pressing against his skull. This wasn't a negotiation. This was a sentence. The figure extended a hand, and for the first time in his life, Vulic knew what it was to be powerless. The ship groaned again, not from damage, from something leaving. Vulic gasped. He felt something pulling away from him, like his very essence was being torn from his body. He saw it happening to his crew as well. They clutched their heads, their movements sluggish, their eyes emptying. It was not death. It was erasure. Vulic's mind shattered with a single horrifying realization. The humans had never been the threat. They were the warning. And now, it was too late. Darkness. Not the absence of light, but something deeper. The absence of existence itself. Vulic was aware, but barely. His thoughts were fragmented, floating in a void where time held no meaning. His body, was it even a body anymore? Felt distant, like a whisper of a memory trying to surface. The HFY Empire had faced countless enemies before. They had crushed entire civilizations, silencing resistance with fire and steel. But this was not war. This was judgment. A voice echoed in the emptiness, neither loud nor soft, but absolute. You were warned. Vulic tried to speak, but no sound came. The voice continued. You did not listen. And then he felt. It was not pain. It was not fear. It was knowing. For the first time in his existence, Vulic saw beyond the thin veil of reality, beyond the arrogance of conquest, beyond the illusion of control. The HFY had believed themselves invincible, believing that power lay in the strength of fleets, in weapons, in domination. But in the vast, unknowable depths of the cosmos, there were things far older, things that had been watching, waiting. Vulic's mind twisted as images flooded into him, planets crumbling into nothingness, entire star systems erased with a whisper, empires before his, greater than his, more powerful than his, gone. The humans had not been fighting the HFY. They had been fighting to keep them away. The realization slammed into Vulic like a collapsing sun. The humans had not been weak. Their desperate warnings, their refusal to engage in direct battle, it had all been a desperate attempt to prevent this. And the HFY, in their arrogance, had walked straight into something beyond war. A presence stirred in the void, shifting like a vast ocean. It was not hostile. It was not cruel. It was simply final. A new sensation crept into Vulik's awareness. He felt himself unraveling. Not dying. Something deeper. His thoughts, his memories, his very essence, being erased. The HFY had burned worlds, erased histories, reduced entire civilizations to dust. And now, they were being granted the same fate. The Empire would not fall. It would not be remembered in defeat. It would simply never have been. Vulik struggled, but against what? There was no battlefield, no enemy to strike, only consequence. His consciousness flickered, slipping further into the void. And just before everything faded into nothingness, he understood. The humans had been trying to save them. Light. Blinding, searing, overwhelming. Vulik existed. Somehow, impossibly, he was still here. His thoughts came sluggishly, drifting like scattered embers in a dying fire. He expected darkness. He expected non-existence. But instead, he saw stars. Not the vast, cold abyss of the Empire's conquest, but something different. The stars looked new, wrong. And then he remembered. The war, the warning, the erasure. He had felt himself unravel, dissolving into nothingness, consumed by forces beyond understanding. The HFY fleet had been torn apart, their might reduced to silence, their empire snuffed out like a flame in a storm. They were supposed to be gone. And yet, Vulik breathed. He gasped, sharp and desperate, as if his body had forgotten how. He had a body. He was whole. But something was wrong. His hands shook as he lifted them. His claws, once sharp and imposing, were dull. His armored exoskeleton, once gleaming with the insignia of the Empire, was smooth and featureless. He reached for his throat, trying to speak. No words came. A sound broke the silence. The slow, steady beep. His vision adjusted, revealing a dimly lit chamber. Strange machines surrounded him, their blinking lights casting long shadows. A large window stretched across one side of the room, revealing a planet below. A planet he recognized. Earth. The door hissed open. Vulik tensed, instinctively reaching for a weapon that was no longer there. A figure stepped inside. Human. Not a warrior. Not a soldier. The man was older, dressed in a simple uniform, his expression calm but unreadable. He studied Vulik with an almost curious look. "You're awake." His voice was steady, measured. "Good." Vulik's throat tightened. He forced himself to speak, his voice hoarse and unfamiliar. "Tell you what?" His own voice startled him. It was different. Softer, weaker. The human seemed to understand. He exhaled, stepping closer. "You don't remember, do you?" Vulik's mind reeled. He remembered everything. The war, the fleet, the anomaly, the erasure. "We were wiped out," Vulik rasped. We were gone." The human nodded. "Yes, your empire. It doesn't exist. It never did." Vulik stared at him, uncomprehending. "Then, why am I here?" The human sat down across from him, resting his hands on his knees. "That's what we're trying to figure out." The room fell into silence. Vulik looked at his hands again. He felt smaller, weaker, different. His body, his mind, it was all wrong. "What have you done to me?" he whispered. The human's gaze darkened. "We didn't do anything." He hesitated, choosing his next words carefully. "Whatever erased your species, left one thing behind." Vulik's pulse pounded. The human leaned forward. "You." A deep chill settled in Vulik's core. He was the last. The HFY Empire, its billions, its fleets, its history, was gone, as if it had never existed. And yet, here he was. Vulik clenched his fists. "Why? Why did I survive?" The human studied him. We don't know. A pause. Then the human sighed. But we have a theory. Vulik waited, his breath shallow. The human's eyes locked onto his. You listened.